things are already heating up. LeBron has kind of made his intentions. The Cavaliers have said they're going to bring back Kevin Love. We'll get some more on that from Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, NBA Insider. We'll get his thoughts on the draft. So much happening, Kevin. The NBA Finals just ended, and, boy, no rest for the weary here. NBA All-Season already heating up.
No, I mean, the Cleveland Victory Parade has turned into a source of news, I guess.
Yeah, LeBron was jumping on a float and basically announced he's coming back. Do we put a lot of stock into that or wait and see for you?
Well, it'd be hard for him to say he was leaving at that point, I think. But, I mean, I never saw that as a realistic possibility. A lot of media members after Game 7 were talking about, okay, well, now he's got his championship, maybe he can go to L.A., but that seems crazy to me. Like, no one has ever given up the opportunity to repeat in such a, key role. I mean, you see minor free agents leave a defending champion, but, that kind of a shake-up on a defending champion, and you could probably extend that to the Cavaliers trading Kevin Love. Like, you just won. Why would you be changing things?
Yeah, and obviously there has been some moves already today, teams trying to catch the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Knicks are one of them here. Try to make some sense of this deal. Now, Rose, former MVP, so it's not like he's a bum, but a lot of people, I think the Knicks fans, are not too happy about the deal. He doesn't seem to be the same player. What is the reason New York goes with a deal like this?
Well, it's awfully optimistic to say the Knicks are chasing the Cavaliers at this point. But, I mean, I think you can certainly talk yourself into it from the standpoint that, first off, if Rose can get back, not obviously to MVP level, but even what we saw from him in the 2015 playoffs where, he was probably an average to above average starting point guard, then, that's massively better than, first off, what New York had on the roster at point guard, and then also what they would have been able to do in free agency where, other than Mike Conley, who I don't think is going to New York, the best free agent point guard out there is, maybe Jeremy Lin, maybe Rajon Rondo, not guys that are probably going to be coming to New York. Rondo wouldn't make a lot of sense there, and Lin, we already know how he was unable to coexist with Carmelo Anthony. So rather than overpaying someone like that, I think it does make probably more sense to bring in Rose on a one-year contract. You've got no guarantees to him beyond this season, and a chance to just go back into free agency next summer if it doesn't work out. But the downside is you give up a former first-round pick in Jerry Grant, who I would have liked to see play in an offense better suited for his talents than the triangle was, and then also Robin Lopez, who the contract that he signed just last summer as a free agent now looks pretty reasonable because you're talking about guys like Bismack Biyombo, maybe Jan Mahinmi are going to probably end up making more than him this summer as free agents.
Talking with Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com NBA Insider. How about the other trade today? We had heard Jeff Teague, his name coming up with Nerlens Noel and the Sixers. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen because he's going to be in Indiana, and it looks like a three-way deal there, the Hawks, the Pacers, and the Jazz as part of that deal. But Teague, the big name.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways actually George Hill might end up having more impact going to Utah because that's Atlanta for Indiana. To me, this is a little bit of a downgrade. I'd rather have George Hill in a vacuum, better defender, better outside shooter. Teague is a playmaker, better with the ball in his hands. But Indiana kind of already has Monte Ellis to do that in the backcourt, and I don't see how well those two guys are going to coexist. Teague did shoot the three well last season. Monte can make the three, but again, both of those guys, you'd primarily want them with the ball in their hands, and only one of them can do that at any given time. And maybe neither of them when Paul George is making plays because he's more than capable of that as well. So a bit of a curious choice for Indiana to me, although they do get a little bit younger. For Utah, I think Hill is a perfect fit for what they needed, a guy who can play off the ball next to Gordon Hayward and Rodney Hood for them, who like to create a lot of their own offense, and bridge the gap to Dante Exum, who's coming back from a torn ACL. You don't force him to start right away, but Hill and Exum could eventually even play together because both of those guys have good size at point guard. So I think Utah solidifies themselves as a playoff team in the West and probably one of the top 5 teams in the conference going into next year. And in Atlanta, we knew they were going to have to make a decision between Teague and Schroeder. Perhaps Philly was offering the 24 and 26. I mean, that seems like a reasonable possibility, but certainly couldn't compete with the number 12 pick that they got out of this deal.
Kevin Pelton's with us. All right, let's turn our attention to the draft here. And the 76ers, Kevin, have informed Ben Simmons, we think, that he will be the number 1 overall pick. Any problem there at all? I mean, is there any debate at this stage from the Sixers that Simmons should not be the guy? I mean, he's worked out for them. They met with them. I mean, all the hurdles should be jumped over by this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they picked anyone other than Ben Simmons at 8:00 tomorrow, then I think we'd all be really stunned at this point. But yeah, I mean, that's the way I would have gone. To me, Simmons is in a tier of his own in this year's draft. He's by far the most talented player, and now it's a matter of going to work and then improving on some of his weaknesses as a shooter and becoming providing more consistent effort at the defensive end. And if he does all that, he is going to be what the Sixers have been waiting for.
Kevin, how does Simmons fit in with the Sixers?
I mean, I like the idea of him as, having the ball in his hands is essentially the point guard in the offense. So, one thing that does trouble me a little bit is the reports that Philadelphia was, again, trying to trade for Teague, other veteran point guards like that, who, would force Simmons to play off the ball, where I don't think he's going to be nearly as good. But, at this point, when you get a guy as talented as Simmons, you don't worry about how he fits in with your roster. You fit the rest of the roster to him. And, I think that's going to mean getting some shooters and defenders on the wing and on the perimeter that can complement him if he is playing with the ball in his hands.
I know you had a great piece up today about the Celtics and what kind of moves they might make, and there's talks about Sixers, Celtics, Chris Dunn. What's your opinion and take on Chris Dunn?
I mean, I think that, defensively, he's going to be a terrific point guard in this league, has a phenomenal steal rate, great body, long arms, all of the things you're looking for defensively. Still some more questions offensively about him. I think the fact that, he wasn't an effective offensive player right away is a bit of a concern to me. And, Providence wasn't great offensively. His decision-making has not been there on a consistent basis. I don't love him as a fit next to Simmons because of the fact that, he's not a consistent outside shooter. He can make the three. He's not terrible in that role, but, he's not the kind of player I think I'd ideally want next to Simmons, but, certainly would be a more talented backcourt player than Philadelphia has had in a long time.
And just to expand on that, so when you talk about Simmons as a point guard and having the ball in his hands, then the Sixers' interest in Dunn, does that concern you? Does it make sense, or why do you think they're in that position?
If they're looking at him primarily as someone to come in and defend point guards, then it certainly makes sense from that standpoint. But I do think you're not getting Dunn's full value if you're not putting the ball in his hands, and same with Simmons.
Yeah, Ben Simmons, and it's funny because some people look at him as, so you think he could be a pure bring the ball up point guard guy in the league right away?
Yeah, I think you'd still want some kind of a combo guard next to him to handle the ball, whether it's, maybe Isaiah Cannon if he gets re-signed, or, Langston Galloway is the kind of free agent, he may not leave New York, but he's the kind of player archetype you're looking at, someone who can defend point guards, but is a good enough three-point shooter that he can play off the ball, actually a lot like the aforementioned George Hill.
All right, let's dive into, you wrote a lot about the Celtics, and that, obviously they have all these picks. The Sixers name continues to be brought up with them. Number 3, Philadelphia. Sixers have all this stuff. How would you describe these two teams in terms of a fit right now?
Well, I think there's certainly some mutual interest in pieces on each other's roster. I think the question is if Boston were willing to do the number 3 for Jahlil Okafor, I think that deal probably would already be done by this point, that they wouldn't be waiting around because it doesn't seem like there's been as much other interest maybe in the 3rd pick as the Celtics were hoping. So that's where, in that article I suggested that it might take an Okafor and Covington package to potentially get that deal done.
So do you like the deal for Philly? I mean, a lot of people, it seems that it has shifted to Okafor that Boston would rather have Noel. So if you're Philadelphia, do you try to get them to take Okafor? Do you give up Noel? I mean, they're in an interesting spot here. Which team has more leverage?
Yeah, I think probably Boston a little bit because, if they just keep the pick and draft whoever they think is the best prospect, Dunn or whoever, that's not the worst case scenario. First off, that guy retains trade value quite certainly, and potentially can help them a little bit as part of a deep backcourt that they would have, a backcourt rotation. And with Philly, there's probably a lot more urgency to make a deal before the season because of the fact that you're burning part of their valuable rookie contracts for guys like Okafor and Noel, who's in the last year of it in Noel's case, and then also just the difficulty of playing all those big men together I think hurts their development to some extent.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it looks like Philadelphia has that that Embiid thing kind of hanging over them. Kevin, how much is that a factor in what kind of decision they make? If you're in their front office, do you advocate keeping the three guys until you find out for certain about Embiid?
I don't think so, just because of the fact that I don't think any of them should be playing power forward. To me, they're all centers. So even if it's just Okafor and Noel and Embiid, is never able to get healthy, then I still think you probably need one of those guys to go.
Yeah, and another thing with it's funny because you throw Sarik's name into the mix too, and who knows what kind of fit he is with the guys on this roster, or even a fit in the NBA for that matter.
But defensively, I definitely think power forward is probably going to be his best position, and that may be true with Simmons as well. We don't know quite as much with him exactly how it's going to work out, but I think both of those guys are probably better suited to defend power forward. So if you're trying to play them on the wing alongside Okafor and Noel, the floor is getting cramped on offense for those guys, and then defensively, you've got them probably defending players who are quicker than they are, and that's a bad scenario.
That, it's funny because you mentioned the floor getting kind of cluttered, and then you look at the other side of things on defense. If you have a guy like Simmons at 6'10", Noel, Embiid, all on the floor at the same time, you look at a team that, has a lot of length on that side of the floor, kind of unprecedented.
Yeah, if you've got the quickness to keep up, certainly the more length you can put out there, the better. And that would offer some intriguing zone possibilities, I think, to Brett Brown if he wanted to consider playing that kind of a lineup.
Talking with Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, NBA insider, as, of course, the 76ers, are they actively shopping Okafor, Noel? Do they want to move one of those guys? They hold a pretty big key after the number one pick here. Do they get themselves back into the first round? That all will happen tomorrow night. And what is your take on Brandon Ingram? I mean, at number 2, it looks like he's going to go to the Lakers. Would he be do you look at him and look at a guy who is an all-star player in the NBA? I mean, his skill set looks like a guy who could shoot the ball. He's really, really thin. Does he look like a one-dimensional type player? I mean, do you have concerns with Ingram in the NBA?
I wouldn't say one-dimensional because of the fact that I think, at the very least with his wingspan, he's going to be a good wing defender ultimately in the league. And, if he's not much better than a 3-and-D role player, well, that's still a very useful guy. But I do think eventually he'll be able to create some of his own offense. My comparison for him, which is probably more modest than a lot of people's, is kind of Chris Middleton of the Milwaukee Bucks with more size. And, he's a guy who was a borderline all-star last year and I think still has a chance to get better. So, I think that's well within the realm of possibility for Ingram, but I don't necessarily see kind of the franchise-defining talent that I think some people see him as. Kevin,
who's your number 3 right now?
I mean, personally, I would go with Dragan Bender. I think he's, maybe even the second best talent in this draft. I think it makes sense probably for the Lakers to go with Ingram because he fits their needs better. But I think Bender can be really good in this league.
You a fan of Buddy Hield?
There's certainly a place for him. I mean, I think that if people describe him as a safe pick, that's probably not right because that's not the track record for seniors. And there's, a chance that if he becomes less efficient in the NBA, he's kind of a Jody Meeks type, someone like that who's, more of a reserve than anything else. But if he can shoot 40% on threes, then he's going to be a valuable player in the NBA.
Yeah, Kevin Pelton's with us, ESPN.com NBA Insider. The draft coming up. And obviously, there's some more. There's a lot of intrigue, guys. How about Jaylen Brown? Cal, he's been all over the map too. See, as you do with a lot of these prospects, by the way, pluses and minuses. But is he a guy you take in the top 5?
He is not. He's probably the prospect I think has the biggest downside risk of anyone who's being talked about in the top 7 or 8 because, he just did not play well at California as a freshman. He was a really inefficient scorer, made bad decisions, struggled with turnovers, and then didn't probably make as consistent an impact defensively as you'd expect given his physique and his physical tools at that end. So, in terms of my stats-only projections for guys, he actually does not rank in the top 100 prospects. That's how poorly he played at Cal.
Kevin, I want to go back to Ben Simmons for a second. If there are some concerns about him, what would they be?
Well, I think the couple of things I mentioned earlier that he needs to work on. I mean, obviously the jumper, we all know that he barely shot any threes last season and, didn't even take that many long two-pointers, sometimes shied away from that shot. I don't have to be a great shooter or even a good shooter to be a great player in the NBA, but, he does need to be in the threat that you can't go under every screen against him. So that's the first thing. And then I think the other thing is just, consistent effort, consistently playing hard at the defensive end. He was there in flashes. Like his block and steal rates were terrific, and it's very rare that you see guys who are able to make those kind of impact plays defensively who are not defenders. But the one way you get there is by taking plays off and not being engaged as a team defender. And he at times at LSU, but that's certainly something that's within his control going forward.
And how about off the floor? Because I know that I've seen some descriptions of him that he's aloof, that he has a sense of self-entitlement, that the senior season at LSU, they didn't even make the tournament. So are there concerns about his demeanor off the floor?
Well, I don't know him at all, so, it's tough for me to say whether those reports about him are accurate or not. But, I think the one tough thing is, for any of us, predicting what a 19-year-old kid is going to be like when they're 24, 25, we know that, all of us mature quite a bit during that period of time. So, that's always difficult to predict, and I think a source of a lot of uncertainty in the draft.
All right, Kevin Pelton, the Sixers will draft Ben Simmons, number 1, Brandon Ingram, number 2. What will Boston do in your mind? You wrote a big piece about them over at ESPN.com, laying out a bunch of different scenarios for them, but ultimately what happens with Boston at number 3?
I don't think they're going to be able to find the value they want for that pick, so then I think they draft Dunn.
All right, there you go. Dunn is a little surprising there. We'll see, because we had been told earlier from someone in Boston that if they took Dunn, Kevin, that to them signified a deal coming.
Well, that's where Chad Ford has him going in his latest mock draft. I mean, he does duplicate a lot of what they have with guys like Marcus Smart and Avery Bradley, but maybe you can never have too many of those guys.
Not a lot of ball handlers in today's NBA. Kevin, always a pleasure, man. Enjoy the draft.
All right, you guys too.